The first time I walked into a bank barn outside Mount Hope, Ohio, it was the middle of August. I expected the usual thing. I expected heat. I expected trapped air. I expected the stale metallic breath every old building gives you after noon. What I found instead changed something in me. The lane was white with dust. The fence posts were hot enough to sting my palm. Cicadas were drilling the tree line so hard the whole place seemed to buzz. I had sweat running down my back before I even crossed the threshold. Then I stepped through that lower doorway. The air changed then, not a little, completely. It dropped against my skin like creek water. I smelled damp limestone, old timber, apples, soil, and the sweet edge of cut hay. The light turned softer. The noise from outside thinned out. I listened for the machine you and I have been taught to expect. I listened for a compressor. I listened for a fan motor. I listened for that electric hum we now call comfort. It was not there. I stood there for 11 minutes looking for the source. I checked the corners. I checked the walls. I checked the outside grade. I looked for a buried condenser line. Nothing. No vent stack. No return grill. No dripping pad. No service disconnect on the wall. Just stone, shade, earth, silence. That realization did not arrive as a theory. It arrived as embarrassment. You spend enough years around modern houses and you start believing expensive comfort is normal. You start believing cool air must come from a machine. You start believing summer relief begins with a bill. Then your body walks into a lower room in Holmes County and learns the truth before your mind catches up. I went back in October. I went back in January. I went back again when the fields turned green. Every season told the same story. In summer, the lower rooms stayed cool without that frantic mechanical struggle you hear all over suburbia. In winter, the same mass that gave up cool in August gave back steadiness when the wind turned sharp. Nothing felt hurried, nothing felt wasteful, nothing felt accidental. What changed me was not only the temperature, it was the absence of anxiety. Modern cooling sounds stressed. It starts hard, it cycles, it quits, it restarts, it demands attention. This place did none of that. It simply held. The building was not fighting weather, it was using it. It was using depth, shade, masonry, moisture, and timing. That is a very different worldview. A few months later, I asked myself the question that started this entire rabbit hole. If the ground under your feet is already cooler than the air attacking your house, why are you paying to ignore it? Why are you cooling hot air after it enters the envelope instead of tempering it before it gets there? Why were you taught to think like a consumer first and a builder second? That was the moment, short and brutal. I had been wrong about everything. I've been going back to that community every summer for 3 years now. I keep walking into lower rooms, spring houses, shaded workspaces, and banked stone walls that keep proving the same thing. The building industry did not forget this by accident. It moved on from it because forgetting was profitable. On my second visit, I brought a simple wall thermometer and left it on a shelf near the stone. Outside, the afternoon hit 91 degrees. Inside, the needle sat between 57 and 59. It barely moved. That steadiness matters more than people think. Your comfort is not only about the lowest number, it is about the absence of swings. A house that drifts slowly feels calm. A house that spikes and crashes feels expensive even before the bill arrives. Here's the promise. You can cut the cooling load hammering your house by using the temperature already sitting under your yard. In many climates, that means dropping incoming air into the 54 to 56 degree range before your air conditioner even starts working. That is where the impossible number begins. 90% is not magic. It is load reduction. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago. It still works if you live in a city and have never done this before. Stay with me, because what I found in Holmes County uses the same physics the Persians used. They cooled desert structures with it more than 2,500 years ago. The science is brutally simple. 4 to 8 feet below grade, soil stops behaving like daily weather and starts behaving like stored temperature. It moves slowly. The U.S. Department of Energy explains the reason. Ground temperature stays far more constant than outdoor air across the year. Geothermal systems exploit that stability. That constant ground is a heat sink in summer and a heat source in winter. It never hurries. Put numbers on it, and the whole trick becomes obvious. When the air outside is 95 degrees Fahrenheit and the soil below frost depth is 55 degrees, you are not inventing cooling. You are moving heat into a colder reservoir that already exists. Think about your neck on a brutal day. A damp cloth there does not change the sun. It changes heat exchange. Ground tempering works the same way. Air moves through buried pipe. The pipe wall sheds heat into surrounding soil. By the time that air reaches the house, part of the hard work is already finished. Oak Ridge National Laboratory pushed the larger version of this idea into national numbers. In 2024, ORNL put national numbers on it. Mass deployment of geothermal heat pumps could save roughly 600 terawatt-hours of electricity in 2050. In some hot climate zones, peak demand could fall by up to 28%. Why? Because moving heat beats manufacturing it. The Department of Energy uses the language directly. Coefficient of performance, 3 to 6 units of heating or cooling moved for every 1 unit of electrical input. Compare that with resistance equipment and with oversized conventional cooling that attacks the problem after the house has already absorbed it. Even a simple earth tube pre-cooler with a 60 to 110 watt inline fan borrows that same advantage. One small input, a much larger shift in heat load. That is why a house can feel calmer before the compressor ever wakes up. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, refrigerant, service calls, filters, maintenance plans, and replacements every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. There is another part of the science people miss. Air conditioning fights two enemies at once. Sensible heat is temperature. Latent load is moisture. 1 ton of air conditioning equals 12,000 BTUs per hour. A big slice of what you pay for is moisture removal after humid air has already entered the shell. Earth-tempered intake air helps there too. Cooler intake means less extreme coil work, longer run quality, and better moisture pull when the system does engage. Your compressor is no longer trying to rescue a bad situation. It is finishing a better one. The first time I followed that principle into an Amish property near Berlin, Ohio, the silence hit me before the cool did. No condenser thrum, no fan blade chop, no cycling. I heard chickens, wagon wheels on gravel, and one screen door closing somewhere up the lane. I felt cool glass jars in my hand. I felt the wall itself hold a deeper temperature than the day outside. A man named Eli watched me looking around and smiled once. Then he said, "The earth does the work if you let it." That was all. No speech, no theory, just that sentence. When I asked how long his family had used the method, he pointed toward the slope behind the house. He said his father used it, and his grandfather did too. 4 generations. He talked about shaded openings, banked stone, and pulling air through earth before it reached food or living space. The knowledge came with families out of the Palatinate, Alsace, Bavaria, and Canton Bern into Pennsylvania, then west into Ohio. It arrived as habit. That is not folklore. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission states it plainly. Rural Pennsylvania root cellars used the constant temperature below frost level. That meant around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit from the 18th century into the refrigeration era. Britannica traces Amish origins to Switzerland, Alsace, and southern Germany, with early settlement in eastern Pennsylvania during the early 18th century. The line is continuous. The place changed. The principle did not. If you go back farther, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. In ancient Persia, builders in Yazd sent air down through wind catchers. Then they passed it over water or subterranean channels to cool interior spaces without electricity. The BBC documented the 33-meter wind catcher at Dowlatabad Garden and the bad gear system that still defines the skyline there. In Roman building, you see the same obsession with thick masonry, buried space, cistern cooling, and delayed heat flow. In Korea, Ondal used flues under stone floors to move warmth through mass in winter. It is the same physics turned the other direction. Every civilization that mastered extreme condition arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate and Canton Burn to Pennsylvania and Ohio more than 200 years ago. They kept building it because it worked. They never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The suppression story begins when comfort stopped being a local skill and became a national market. In 1902, Willis Carrier built the first modern electrical air conditioning system for industrial humidity control. By the 1920s and 1930s, the larger opportunity was obvious. Sell not only a machine, sell a dependency. The threat was not one rival company. The threat was every design choice that lowered the cooling load before a compressor was needed, every shaded wall, every banked room, every deep porch, every earth-tempered intake. All of it threatened future sales measured in equipment tonnage, power demand, and replacement cycles. The mechanism did not look like censorship. That is why it worked. It looked like professionalization. The language of design moved out of craft and into standards. Thermal mass, site orientation, shaded exposure, night flushing, and subterranean tempering were pushed to the margins. Sizing tables, duct calculations, and peak load assumptions took center stage. Then the modern version became explicit. The Institute for Market Transformation reported the key moment. On March 3, 2021, the International Code Council Board made the move. It eliminated governmental member voting from the final determination of the International Energy Conservation Code. More than 200 individuals and groups commented. Over 75% opposed the change. It happened anyway. The named allies are sitting in the documents. The National Association of Home Builders opposed stronger efficiency requirements after the 2019 cycle. The American Gas Association supported the ICC framework change and later celebrated the March 2024 appeals outcome affecting the 2024 Energy Code. On the media side, the post-war shelter magazine world did its part. Appliance advertising culture taught you to imagine comfort as a purchase service, not a building behavior. Those interests lined up neatly. Builders wanted lower first-cost obligations. Fuel interests wanted ongoing dependence. Manufacturers wanted bigger systems and faster replacement. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and contractor habits. Not because it failed, because it was not profitable. The continuation is happening in plain sight. Grist documented the shift. Code governance moved away from thousands of public officials and toward a smaller standards process. That smaller process was more vulnerable to industry pressure. In March 2024, the American Gas Association applauded ICC appeals. Those appeals removed or softened provisions tied to electrification, vehicle readiness, and related energy measures. The motive was naked. If buildings need less active cooling, fewer units get sold. If houses are designed around passive stability, fewer customers stay trapped on the service treadmill. The HVAC system market in America is worth tens of billions of dollars a year. Every alternative installed is compressor tonnage that never gets sold, serviced, replaced, financed, and defended. That shift carried money in several directions at once. Utilities benefited from summer peak demand. Builders benefited from standardized plans that ignored site-specific craft. Manufacturers benefited from planned replacement and branded upgrades. Once suburban growth exploded after World War II, passive discipline looked slow and local, while packaged cooling looked modern and scalable. That image was worth a fortune. Not because the old knowledge stopped working, because the new supply chain was easier to finance, easier to sell, and easier to repeat thousands of times. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need one thing they already have or can easily get: a yard, a drill, a bottle, A weekend? Here's the exact blueprint I would build first. I would start with one shaded trench, not a whole network, because small systems teach you faster. Pick the north side if you have it. Dig a run between 28 and 36 feet long. Bury the pipe 6 to 8 feet deep where soil temperature stays steady. Use 6-inch or 8-inch smooth wall HDPE or Schedule 40 PVC. Never use corrugated drain tile. Give the run a steady 2% slope back toward a condensate drain. Water must leave. At the intake end, raise a hood 24 to 36 inches above grade. Cover it with stainless insect screen and a washable MERV filter box. Keep the intake under shade if possible. At the house end, bring the pipe into a basement, crawl space, or utility closet through a sealed sleeve. Connect it to an inline EC duct fan rated between 60 and 110 watts. Add a snap disc thermostat set to close around 78 degrees and open around 68 degrees. Add a manual override switch beside it. Use mastic on every joint. Wrap the last 6 feet near the foundation with closed cell insulation, so the air does not gain heat right before entry. If your soil stays wet, bed the pipe in 3/4 inch washed gravel. Then line the trench with geotextile fabric before backfill. If humidity is brutal, add a condensate tee and a cleanout cap every 12 feet. If your lot is small, 130-foot run still teaches you the result. You do not need a perfect estate. You need a temperature difference and a sealed path. The screen is cheap, the filter is cheap, the sealed joints are cheap, mold is not. HDPE pipe usually runs $7 to $14 per foot depending on diameter and region. A quiet inline fan costs $89 to $146. A thermostat switch costs $12 to $18. Screen, mastic, gravel, geotextile, and fittings usually add $74 to $132. If you dig it yourself, total material cost lands between $286 and $492. If you want a cleaner indoor finish, add one short section of insulated metal duct and a balancing damper. That usually adds $38 to $61. You are still well under the price of one repair visit on a modern central unit. Smooth wall pipe is not optional. Corrugated pipe causes standing condensate, trapped dust, and biofilm. That turns a cooling tube into a long, damp problem. Use smooth wall only. This build takes one Saturday morning for layout and trench marking. Then it takes one full weekend for pipe, seal, and test if you rent a small excavator. On a 95-degree day with soil in the mid-50s, this setup can deliver cool supply air early. You can see 58 to 66 degree air before your AC starts. In many houses, that means the conventional system starts later, runs shorter, and dehumidifies better when it finally wakes up. There is one more part people skip. Do not pull air from a dirty low spot or from beside a driveway baking in reflected heat. Put the intake where shade actually lives. Morning shade is good. Shade is better. If you can plant around it, do it. If you can shield it with a simple cap, do it. Maintenance is simple. Change the filter once a season. Flush the clean out once a year. Inspect the screen every spring. That is it. If you live on a tight city lot, the layout changes, but the logic does not. You can run one buried line under a side yard, under a shaded drive edge, or along the coolest strip you control. If you have a basement window well, you can sleeve into that zone and finish the last transition with sealed duct. If you only have a crawl space, keep the entry high enough to manage condensate and service access. The first version does not need to be beautiful. It needs to be airtight, drainable, cleanable, and shaded. Your conventional system costs $6,800 to $14,600 to install. In hard summer climates, it costs $118 per month to $247 per month to run. It lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $286 to $492 total. It lasts 25 to 50 years. Your choice. Everything I have covered across this channel is now in one place. That includes root cellar cooling, lime wash sanitation, and gravity-fed water. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. The full guide is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. The real shift is not the trench. It is what the trench proves. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you the bigger condenser. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. The Amish did not read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Once you understand that, the whole house looks different. The attic is no longer just an attic. It is a heat battery you can isolate. The porch is no longer decorative. It is solar control. The basement is not dead space. It is thermal leverage. The yard is not scenery. It is stored temperature. You were taught to see purchases. You should have been taught to see systems. You will notice the shift first at dusk. That is when most houses surrender. The roof has stored heat all day. The drywall is warm. The attic is still radiating. The compressor outside begins its evening panic. A house with earth-tempered intake behaves differently. It starts bleeding heat earlier. It feels less swollen. The first floor settles faster. The bedrooms stop feeling trapped. The air does not need to be icy to feel merciful. It needs to stop attacking you. That is the difference. You also start thinking in seasons instead of emergencies. In May, you check the screen and wash the filter. In July, you listen to how late the compressor waits before starting. In September, you notice the bill before you notice the weather. In October, you realize the same buried line that helped you in August is now buffering the cold edge of morning. Nothing about this mindset is flashy. That is exactly why it survives. It rewards attention. It rewards routine. It rewards people who would rather understand a system than rent one forever. Once you feel this work in your own house, you stop talking about efficiency like a slogan and trust structure. You start noticing peace, sleep, quieter evenings, slower bills, and the relief of knowing the ground beneath you already helps. If you believe real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me. For what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they are done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop 3 things in the comments. Your state, your worst summer power bill, and whether your grandparents used a cellar, springhouse, porch, or attic fan. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I am going to show you a 1946 Penn State document. It reveals how to keep a house dry and cool using lime, shade cloth, and moving night air. The method uses nothing but fabric, mineral wash, and simple timing. And I will show you a post-war report too. It proves building authorities understood the method decades before telling you nothing about it. You're not going to want to miss that one.